What's up, YouTube? John here, back with another video, and I wanted today's video to be about judgment. I know there's been a little bit of a gap in my last video, so there have been a few topics that I think have really exemplified the topic of judgment really well. Going from Marjorie Taylor Greene and her falling out with MAGA, and going forward into Trump meeting Zohran after he won the election, and concluding with Tim Walz and the amount of fraud that was discovered in the state of Wisconsin. These are three topics that I think people have been very quick to give their opinions on, and humans in general are judgmental. I think even with the last few years, as much as there's been a specific political party, who you are, who have been trying to convey that we should not be judgmental of people's choices. I think that they are even exemplifying the fact that they are judgmental. And my point with saying that is that there is no exception to being judgmental. I think that this is a very human characteristic that is the result of evolutionary choices that we made. We were once cavemen in the dark, constantly evaluating whether something was going to kill us or not. Maybe if you were a kid, you were scared of the dark, and that's a similar thing, and that's where I think that comes from. There's the years of conditioning that lead to people being judgmental, and my point with this is just saying that this isn't a big deal. This is just a reality in life, is that people are going to be judgmental. I mean, even with the current president, even with any presidency, I should say, we're constantly evaluating and casting judgment on whether the president is doing a good job or not. So with that being said, the first topic I wanted to talk about was the falling out of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump. And I thought that this was a really frustrating topic because, hand in hand with judgment comes the tribalism that is exhibited in politics. And this is like beating a dead horse at this point, because I think if you've been following politics for a while, or even, again, a fact of human nature, similar to judgment, is the fact that, humans like belonging in a group. And this results in a few weird things that happen, such as, going against the pack. And that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene did, which led her to be ostracized. I felt, at least in my opinion, I felt like she was asking questions, or at least giving, valid criticisms of things that she had an issue with. And, we have such an inclination with politics to basically label anyone that's not with us as against us, and to ostracize them. I think it was disappointing, because I don't think that having one opinion, or not having, I think that avoiding discussions with criticisms actually magnifies certain things. And to kind of segue into another topic, and what will be a topic of my video after this, is the rising popularity of Nick Fuentes and America First. And I think by the way people have been arguing with him by saying, like, you're a racist or you're anti-Semitic, I think that this has the opposite effect now. People are simply tired of just being labeled as one thing, and the same thing is happening now, where Marjorie Taylor Greene is being labeled as a traitor, but what about the people that she represents and that feel that way? The conservatives did a good job in this last election of not ostracizing people that the left was seen to be doing. They were the ones that were purity testing the other Democrats, and Republicans, as a result, were able to capture a lot of voters. And even online, that was a reason why a lot of people fell out of the Democratic Party. And to see Trump make the same mistake that led to his success is, I think, a little bit concerning, because it just shows, I think it's a sign of being out of touch, or maybe not necessarily having your ear to the people. Because I think if there's a sizable amount of people that, support Marjorie Taylor Greene and her perspective and her criticisms, I think that, this will fracture the conservative movement. And on Twitter, that has been the case within the last few months, and this is one of the topics that has shown that. So that's why I think that, this is not just a squeaky wheel gets the oil kind of situation. I think actually, there were a lot of people that hold the opinion that Marjorie Taylor Greene had, and to kind of split your base by treating her the way that you did, I think is a bad move in my opinion. But moving forward, the next topic was in regards to Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump.
Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay, you can just say yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay, that's easier.
And I thought, if anything, this was a sign of Trump showing good judgment as far as being open to the fact that, he recognizes that Zohran won the election and that they have to work together in order to reverse what's going on in New York. I don't think a majority of people there are really happy with what's going on with New York, and I think that a lot of people want to see things turned around there, such as crime and the economy. And Trump maintaining a positive attitude and them showing a unified front, I thought was actually a really good move by both of them. And it really exposes the fact that the media is against the government and honestly the betterment of America. I thought no other interview exemplified this other than their press conference together, because they were immediately trying to, show any cracks in the armor by prodding them. And, even Trump just said outright, "You can call me a fascist. It's easier that way," which was hilarious in my opinion. But it's just really crazy to see this kind of antagonistic nature that journalists have. And I think if you are getting your information from any of these news sources, it's obvious that they're reporting with like a biased slant. And I would urge you to at least seek out other sources to look for your information, or at least consider it, because I think now the main handicap you can have is by getting your news through only one source. I think that's the main way, that you're basically running a two-legged race with one leg tied to your hand. Everyone is biased, so to only expose yourself to one sense of bias is it's a disadvantage when there's so many sources of information. But that tangent aside, and that rant about mainstream media aside, I thought they did a good job with the press conference, and it gave the impression of hope, which I think is really important. And one of my biggest criticisms of Trump, even before in his first term running, was the fact that I felt like he wasn't able to unify the parties. He wasn't the unifier that I felt like the country needed, and I thought he did a good job here. And this was something that I wanted to see more of with both of his campaigns, actually, was just being open to working with the other side and extending that olive branch. So that was a positive on my end. I'll give him credit for that one. But overall, I think people, this facade of unity can only go so far, and I think people are really eager to see what Zohran can get done. And I think that, if anything, if he's not able to get results, I think that this will actually backfire, and people will be even more, I think New York will be in an even worse state, unfortunately, and I hope that doesn't happen. But that's my prediction with this whole thing, is that I think that the vote for Zohran was an act of desperation by New York. It was a Hail Mary to kind of overturn the traditional candidate that has run and to try something new. And, people will only remain calm for so long until they feel like things aren't getting better. And I really hope that Zohran can give them the results that they're looking for. But overall, yeah, that's my thoughts on that. And I thought that Trump exemplified good judgment there. And I think that overall, this story with Zohran and Trump was really important, because it shows the stark contrast to the utter failure of Tim Walz and, what had happened in Wisconsin. And what I'm referring to is the amount of fraud that was discovered there. And I wanted to end on this specific topic and relate it to judgment, because I think that, while there are a lot of discussions online and opinions regarding these other topics, and people are very quick to be critical. I think that there has not been enough criticism levied against Tim Walz in regards to the massive failure that had happened in Wisconsin. And, we can argue back and forth about what's right and wrong, who we agree with and who we disagree with in politics. And that has been the focus of most conversations that I see online. But I think there hasn't been enough of a focus on the utter failure that has happened here in this state. And I can't help but draw similarities to Rick Scott, who is the governor of Florida, who is basically able to fail upwards into government. And this has been a reoccurring theme as we get more information about politics. We're just seeing this continual trend of people who are grossly incompetent able to fail up in politics. And by what I mean by this is that Tim Walz was almost vice president of the United States, despite the fact that his state had underwent this, massive exploit in funds. And it's easy to say that this isn't a big deal, or, to overlook it and to support him because he is the messenger of, ideas that you agree with. But I think that there has to be a time where you really have to make or establish minimum requirements for government. I mean, we literally have Congress people that are insider trading. There are enormous levels of corruption that are going on in government right now, and that is intentional. That is an intentional wrongdoing that is done by these public servants that is not going unpunished. And the fact that you have intentional wrongdoings not being addressed, and now outright incompetency not being addressed, there is only so much that people will be able to tolerate. And, I think going back to Nick and his interview with Tucker, again, I think the most important thing that he brought up, and why I think he has really valid points in regards to the failing nature of Democrats and Republicans, is because, it just feels like no matter who you vote for, you are just getting failures on both sides, and it has just become a uniparty at this point. It's the illusion of choice. Voters aren't being represented one way or the other, no matter who they vote for. And that is why people like Nick Fuentes, and why I think people like Zohran Mamdani, who is a self-proclaimed socialist Democrat, that is why both parties are gravitating towards these more extreme candidates. And what I mean by extreme is that, Nick is obviously a very isolationist conservative because he wants America first. He wants a stark contrast to how we've been operating the country, which is what I mean by extreme. This isn't a negative connotation. This is just an extreme difference to how we've been operating this country historically. And same thing with Zohran Mamdani. I mean, you had Bernie Sanders lose an election being labeled as a socialist or as a communist, and now years later you have Zohran Mamdani who won an election off of similar talking points. Both parties are becoming more extreme because they're the only ones engaging. These extreme perspectives are the only ones engaging and utilizing politics. And, that's part of the reason why I made this channel and wanted to contribute my voice into politics, was because I think that this elevated rhetoric could result in a negative outcome if not checked. I mean, the way I see this going is that in the future, will both candidates be expected to be more communist, more socialist Democrat and more isolationist conservative? Or, in other ways, will both candidates be expected to be more extreme to cater to these more extreme views? And what will that look like when we have to have these elections every 4 years, going back and forth between these vast political extremes? And we're currently seeing it now with Democrats in current elections starting to win again. We were convinced through media and content creators that there would be this big red wave, and that, Trump would usher in this new era of conservative dominance. And I don't think that we're seeing that yet. But who knows what will happen in the next few years and what will happen in the future. But I think that these are really interesting topics if you can kind of zoom out from the doom and gloom of the reality of politics and look at it with an observational lens. I think this is really interesting stuff, and that's kind of why I like talking about it and making this kind of content. But yeah, if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and more importantly, please consider leaving a comment whether you agree or disagree, because like I said, I like discussing these topics, and this has just been an outlet for me to do that. So yeah, if you made it this far, please take care and be safe.